So you've heard me talk about many types of insulation so far, but what are the differences and characteristics of insulation that I have mentioned? One of the three most common insulation materials in American homes is fiberglass insulation, which is made of tiny glass strands that create pockets of air in between the fiberglass. It's actually the pockets of air that slows the heat from entering into our homes. Cellulose insulation usually consists of torn up pieces of recycled paper that is treated with a fire retardant and an antimicrobial to prevent mold from growing when moisture is introduced to the material. And polyfoam insulation. Polyfoam insulation covers a wide variety of foam insulations like polyurethane, polystyrene or injected polyurethane foam, or sprayed insulation. All three insulations have their strong and weak points. For instance, fiberglass insulation is light, cheap, and has a good R value at an average of 3.5 R value per inch. But fiberglass doesn't insulate very well if exposed to outside air currents. Also, exposure to large amounts of water renders the insulation worthless. Now, cellulose insulation also has a good R value at 3.5 R value per inch, and it can actually make an effective air sealer in a home that leaks large amounts of conditioned air outside. But cellulose insulation decomposes, so over time the R value of cellulose insulation decreases. In addition, cellulose can create a lot of dust in your home, and like fiberglass, large amounts of water ruins the insulation and makes it ineffective. Now, polyfoam insulations have superior R values. In fact, R values with polyfoam can be as high as R7 per inch. Polyfoams are also waterproof. Polyfoams can be exposed to large amounts of water constantly without any loss of R value. But polyfoams are flammable, and exposure to sunlight breaks down the foam, causing it to lose its integrity and R value as the sun turns the foam into fine dust over time. So, how much of this insulation do we need in the South? In the South, we are considered zones 2 and 3. In zones 2 and 3, it's recommended that we have at least an R value of 30 to 60 in our attics. So how much do you have? Using the R value per inch that was provided in the previous slide, you should be able to go into your attic and measure with a ruler what your R value is. If you have cellulose and you measure 6 inches, you can feel pretty confident that the R value of your attic insulation is about R19, and you should probably consider adding more insulation. By the way, we can always add insulation on top of existing insulation to achieve a higher R value. You don't have to remove the existing insulation if you don't want to. For instance, let's say we go over the top of this R19 cellulose insulation with 6 more inches of fiberglass insulation. Yes, you can mix insulations. 6 inches of fiberglass insulation will account for an additional R21. So after the additional fiberglass insulation, the new R value comes out to be an R40. That's a nice R value for an attic in the South. But R40 doesn't mean anything if you can't keep the air that we conditioned inside our homes and the outside air where it belongs, outside. It's a fact. Houses built prior to 1985 leak about 20% of their conditioned air outside the home. That's air we paid to condition. It's even worse than that. Because of the law of equilibrium, if conditioned air is leaving our home, that means hot, humid air from outside is replacing that air in our home. We will eventually have to pay to condition that air also, which will then leak out of our homes, and so on and so on. That's the law of equilibrium. So what exactly is the law of equilibrium? The law of equilibrium is pretty simple. It pertains to the second law of thermodynamics, which states high temperatures always move towards low temperatures. This also works the same way for humidity. And in the South, we know humidity. The high humidity that we experience in the South is always gravitating towards the low humidity conditioned air in our homes. Here's an example. We've all walked into our home from the outside and felt that rush of cold air passing by us. Feels good. But what do you think's happening there? It's the exchange of cold conditioned air being sucked out and replaced with hot, humid outside air. Well, even if our doors are closed, this effect still could be happening in our homes. The fact is, there are many ways that our conditioned air leaks out of our homes. Also, air leaking into our exterior walls can cause an effect previously mentioned called wind washing. Wind washing is when wind-driven air flows through the insulation, reducing its thermal resistance. But what are some of the more common ways air leaks out of our homes? This has been Insulation and Air Sealing, Part 2 of 5. Please feel free to visit this video as many times as you like. And remember, always take care of the cool side.